It was another Monday morning at the glass tower downtown. The lobby echoed with footsteps, heels clicking against polished marble phones, buzzing voices tangled in deadlines, and coffee cups clutched like lifelines. People moved, fast eyes locked on. Screens or elevators, not on the woman pushing a mop bucket along the wall. She blended into the background the way janitors often do, invisible, unless something was wrong. Her name was Denise, but to most, she was just the uniform, just another worker, keeping the place clean. But then something happened that froze the company's CEO Jonathan Kellerman in his tracks. He had just stepped through the revolving doors briefcase in one hand, thoughts already on the meeting waiting upstairs when he heard IT. Voice sharp, steady, rolling through a language that pulled him back to his last trip to Shanghai Mandarin, spoken perfectly, not like someone practicing from an app, but like a native. He slowed and scanned the lobby, there by the touchscreen directory. Was Denise the janitor speaking with an older man in a navy jacket who looked lost and relieved all at once? Her tone was calm, her gestures confident. She was directing him toward the elevators as if she had done it 100 times before. Jonathan frowned. He had seen her before. Of course, late nights when meetings dragged on, she would be wiping down the halls, never speaking, never drawing attention. He had never even asked her name. But here she was switching languages as easily as flipping a light switch, because the moment she finished in Mandarin, a delivery man approached her and she slipped into Spanish fluid and warm gracias. The man replied, blinking in surprise. Then another vendor with a clipboard looked confused over a mislabeled shipment. She pivoted into French, smooth and clear, pointing the man in the right direction with a faint smile. 3 languages in less than 5 minutes, spoken like they were second nature. Jonathan felt a strange tightness in his chest. Not anger, something closer to guilt. He had spent decades in global logistics, hired entire teams of translators and consultants. Yet in his own building, the most fluent person he had come across was wearing a burgundy uniform, pushing a cart of cleaning supplies. He stood, still for a moment, the noise of the lobby rushing around him, while one quiet truth cut through it all. This woman was not invisible. She was extraordinary. He stepped forward, clearing his throat softly. "Excuse me," he said. Denise turned, startled but composed. "Yes, sir. That was Mandarin. Right? Yes, and Spanish. And French?" She nodded once and answered. "Yes, sir. Also Portuguese, German, Arabic, Italian, Swahili, and I read Latin. But I do not count that." Jonathan blinked. "You are telling me you speak 9 languages?" "Yes, sir." Was no pride in her tone, no arrogance, just a plain fact delivered without hesitation. In that moment, he realized he was not talking to a janitor. He was standing in front of a walking United Nations. Jonathan stared at her for a long moment, trying to catch up to the truth that had just been dropped so casually. 9 languages spoken by a woman he had walked past for years, without ever once asking her name. "What is your name?" he asked, finally. "Denise Atwater," she replied, her voice even, steady. "Miss Atwater, are you free for a few minutes?" he asked. Her brow lifted slightly. Now she asked, "Yes. Now, I would like to speak with you in my office." He noticed the hesitation in her eyes. Not fear, but that reflex built over years of being overlooked, of being underestimated, of being seen only for the uniform, not the person. Still she gave a slow nod. "All right." They stepped into the elevator together. The mirrored walls reflected an unlikely pairing, the CEO in his crisp, tailored suit, and the janitor in her burgundy uniform, holding her cleaning rag still tucked into the pocket. For a moment, silence filled the space, broken only by the low hum of the lift. Then Denise spoke quietly. "I have worked here for 13 years, she said. "Never thought I would be invited up here." Jonathan gave her a faint smile. "You might be surprised how quickly things can change." She said nothing more, but her eyes stayed fixed on the glowing numbers as they climbed. When the doors opened, she stepped out first. Her shoes, nearly silent against the polished wood floor of the executive hallway, it smelled of citrus polish and leather, the faint scent of money, if such a thing had a smell. The assistant at the front desk looked up eyes wide at the sight of the janitor walking beside the CEO, but Jonathan offered no explanation, just nodded for them to pass through. He opened the glass door to his office and gestured for her to sit across the desk. She lowered herself carefully into the chair, folding her hands in her lap, her eyes drifting across the room, not impressed, just observant. The large world map behind him, dotted with colored pins, the tray of espresso cups, the framed photo of his daughters, the dusty award from a Brussels conference, all catalogued silently. By her gaze, Jonathan leaned forward. "I'm going to be honest, I did not expect to have this conversation today." She gave a small nod posture, still face unreadable. "But I just heard you switch through 3 languages like it was nothing, and I need to understand. How does someone like you end up here cleaning floors?" For a moment, she did not answer. Her eyes flicked toward the window, then back to him. "You got time for the truth?" she asked. "I would not have asked otherwise." She rubbed her palms together, as if warming up the words. "I was born in Toledo, Ohio. Only child," she began. "My dad was a pipe fitter. My mom, a nurse's aide. They pushed education, like it was religion, and I earned a scholarship to Kent State, majored in linguistics, was halfway through. A master's. When my mother got sick, I came home to take care of her. Then my dad passed from a stroke 6 months later. Everything fell apart after that." She paused, breathing slowly. "I had a baby. No partner who stayed around, no money. So I worked whatever. I could grocery stores, nursing homes, temp jobs. Eventually, a custodial supervisor here offered me night shifts. Let me pick up my daughter from school and keep the lights on, so I took it. That is how I got here." Jonathan listened silently, not blinking, not interrupting, but the languages she continued. "I never stopped learning. Borrowed textbooks, listened to recordings, read newspapers in 5 different tongues, just to stay sharp. It is the only thing I do that makes me feel like I still matter. Most. People never ask," she added. "They just see the uniform and assume." That word hung in the air. Assume. Jonathan felt it land heavier than any quarterly report or balance sheet ever had. He realized he was looking at a woman who had carried more discipline and persistence than half the executives he worked with every day. The rest of the morning dragged for Jonathan Kellerman, but his thoughts never left Denise Atwater. Even during budget calls and back-to-back vendor reviews, her calm voice speaking. 9 languages echoed in his head. That kind of fluency does not just appear overnight. It takes years of work, dedication, and sacrifice. And she had carried it quietly into a janitor's cart for more than a decade without anyone noticing mid-afternoon. He was restless. He stood from his desk, ignoring the paperwork, and took the elevator down to the service level. The air down there was warmer, heavier, filled with the smell of bleach and stacked cardboard. He passed maintenance crews, break rooms vending, machines humming against beige walls. Finally, he spotted her through an open doorway, carefully restocking microfiber cloths onto a metal shelf. "Mind if I bother you again?" he asked. She turned, startled. "You came down here." He smiled. Couldn't stop thinking. "About our talk. Listen," he continued. "I have a favor to ask." She wiped her hands on her uniform. "What kind of favor?" "There's a meeting upstairs. A group from our Sao Paulo office came in early, and our translator canceled last minute. Can you help?" Her eyes widened. "Portuguese?" she asked. "Yes." She hesitated for only a breath, then nodded. "Yes, I can do that." Minutes later, they were in conference room. 4C4. Brazilian executives sat awkwardly around a glossy table, tapping their phones, waiting impatiently. Denise stepped inside, quietly smoothed her uniform, and began speaking in confident Portuguese. The transformation was immediate. Shoulders that had been tense suddenly dropped, smiles spread across tired faces. She was not just translating. She was connecting, bridging a gap that had been widening for months. One of the visitors cracked a joke. In Portuguese, Denise laughed and fired back with a return joke of her own. The table erupted in chuckle. Jonathan sat at the corner of the room, not understanding a single word, but understanding everything. It was connection, respect, trust, and it was something no software or hired consultant had been able to create. After 20 minutes, the meeting wrapped. One of the Brazilian executives turned to Jonathan and said in English, "She is better than anyone we have worked with this year. Where did you find her?" Jonathan looked at Denise, who was already quietly stacking empty cups onto a tray. "Right here," he said, "in the hallway." He caught up to her. "Have you ever done professional translation before?" he asked. She shook her head. "Just helping out at hospitals. Government offices, places like that. No certificate, no degree, no time for school. My daughter needed me more." Jonathan nodded. "And where is she now?" 26, she said, nurse in training, paid her own way through school, stubborn like her mama. For a second, they both smiled, and it no longer felt like CEO and janitor, just two people sharing the weight of real-life stories. Back downstairs, she clocked back in, picked up her card, and kept moving as if nothing had changed. But Jonathan knew everything had changed. He had just witnessed the company's most overlooked worker solve a problem that months of planning could not fix, and he was not about to let that go unseen. The next morning, Denise was finishing up her shift, wiping down the east lobby when her supervisor Ron tapped her on the shoulder. He looked uneasy. Not annoyed, just uncertain. "Mr. Kellerman asked to see you again," he said. Denise blinked. "Did I do something wrong?" Ron shook his head. "No idea. He just told me to send you up." She cleaned her. Hands on a towel, smoothed her uniform, and walked the same path she had taken the day before, only this time it felt different. People looked up as she passed, some whispering, some watching with polite curiosity. It was as if the whole building had heard something, though. No one said a word. When she reached the executive suite, Jonathan was waiting by the window, coffee mug in hand, staring out at the skyline. "Come in," he said without turning around. She stood quietly until he faced her. "I have been." Thinking, he began placing the mug on a coaster. About talent waste, about how many people never get a shot. Not because they are not good, but because nobody looks twice. Denise stayed still, arms crossed, wary of easy praise. "I want to create a new position," he said slowly. "Something this company badly needs, even if we did not know it before." She furrowed her brow. "For what?" "Cultural liaison, international affairs. Someone who can speak the languages, bridge gaps with our vendors and visitors, handle contracts. And miscommunications, all the global touchpoints we stumble over every single week." Her mouth parted, but no sound came. "You are qualified more than most of my leadership team, honestly, and you have already proved you can handle it with patience, grace, and intelligence." She stared at him, eyes narrowing slightly. "Is this real as it gets?" he said. "I do not have a college degree." She reminded him, "You have something better. Lived experience, fluency in 9 languages, discipline, commitment, you think. I care about a piece of paper." She shifted her weight, still unconvinced. "Why me?" He looked directly at her. "Because I watched you solve 3 problems in 3 languages before 9 in the morning yesterday, and because I am tired of walking past people. Like you people doing twice the work for half the credit." She crossed her arms tighter. "You know, what people are going to say, I don't care," he answered firmly. Silence stretched long between them before she let out a slow breath. "I have never had an office job, never had a title," she said quietly. "You will learn fast." He said, "I don't even own clothes for this kind of thing." She admitted, "HR will handle that. I will make sure you have what you need." She gave a dry laugh. "You thought of everything." "I'm trying," he said. Her eyes dropped to her hands, then back at him. "You are sure this isn't some kind of favor? This is overdue recognition," he replied. She bit her lip, eyes shining, though she blinked away the tears before they fell. "All right, then," she said, voice firm. "Let's see what I can do." He extended his hand. She shook it, and in that moment, it was not just a handshake. It was history being rewritten. But outside that office, not everyone would be celebrating. Lunchtime, whispers would travel. Faster than the elevators. The janitor from the night shift had just been promoted to an executive-level role. By the time Denise sat down in her new office on the 12th floor, the gossip had already spread through cubicles, corridors, and break rooms. Nobody knew the details, just the headline: the janitor had been promoted by the CEO himself. Some people smiled, said good for her, others frowned, muttered about favoritism, and checked their own stalled promotion files. In the staff lounge, 2 marketing assistants leaned close over plastic salad bowls, whispering, "I have a master's in international business, and I have been waiting 2 years for a step up," one said, "and she was scrubbing floors last week." Her friend shrugged. "Maybe she knows something we don't. Please, it's Kellerman trying to look progressive. Check a box." That same tone crept into quiet Slack channels and side conversations in boardrooms. Not anger, exactly more like disbelief that someone could leap over the ladder without climbing each. Young Denise felt it the second she walked into her modest office: a desk, a plant, a computer, still untouched. To her it looked like another planet, but to others it looked like a threat. Later that week she was called into a meeting, not by Kellerman, but by someone higher up, Eleanor Craig, senior board member, decades in the company, sharp suits, sharper tongue. Denise entered a small conference room on the 17th floor, where Eleanor waited with a stack of papers. "Sit," Eleanor said, without looking. Up Denise sat, hands folded in her lap. Eleanor tapped her pen twice, then spoke. "So, Miss Atwater, I reviewed your file. You have no college degree, no corporate training, no management certifications." "That is correct," Denise replied, calm, steady. "You were a janitor here 3 weeks ago." Eleanor leaned back. "Help me understand how someone with your background is now handling high-level international affairs." Denise met her gaze. "Because I speak the languages, I understand the cultures. I have already fixed 2 vendor contracts and cleared a 3-month delay in our Morocco deal. I also secured a verbal agreement with our Brazilian partners that legal is finalizing next week." Eleanor pursed her lips. "You think this company should be run on instinct and charm?" Denise allowed herself the faintest smile. "No, ma'am. I think it should be run on results." The air in the room shifted slightly, as if the words carried more weight than either of them expected. Eleanor stood slowly, closing the folder. "You're a gamble," she said flatly. Denise answered quietly, "I'm used to that. My entire life has been one." When the meeting ended, Denise did not return straight to her office. She walked out of the glass tower and sat on a bench across the street, staring up at the building. For years, she had walked past it, pushing a cart, wearing the same uniform, wondering if anyone saw her. Now, everyone did, and not all of them liked it. She pulled out her phone and called her daughter just to hear her voice. They talked. About groceries, about the dog, about nothing important, but it steadied her, reminded her why she was still standing. When she hung up, she took one long breath, stood up, and walked back through those same glass doors. The whispers would not break her. Not now, not ever. The next morning, Denise arrived early, long before the rush of suits and chatter filled the building. She slipped quietly into her new office, the plant still green, the desk still bare, and opened the thick folder Victor from International. Operations had dropped on her desk days earlier. Contracts from Dubai, reports from Italy, vendor complaints from Sao Paulo, pages and pages of messy communication errors. She read each line, carefully jotting notes in the margins, marking mistranslations, spotting errors that had cost the company thousands. By the time the sun was fully up, she was ready. When Victor walked in, stiff-faced, clipboard under his arm, Denise looked up calmly. "I reviewed everything you sent," she said. He raised a brow. "That fast?" "I stayed late last night," she replied, "and I can fix half of these issues by the end of the week." Victor did not answer right away, but he placed the next set of files on her desk without comment. That same afternoon, Denise was asked to join a meeting with partners from Morocco, a deal that had been stuck for months. The executives filed into the room, tense, guarded, ready for another frustrating session. Denise introduced herself in fluent Moroccan Arabic. The shift was immediate. Shoulders softened, smiles returned. One of the visitors leaned. back listening carefully, then leaned forward again, speaking faster and more openly. The room warmed as trust replaced suspicion. By the end of the meeting, the outlines of an agreement were finally in place. When they left, one of the Moroccan partners touched his chest in gratitude and said softly in Arabic, "No one has ever spoken to us like this. Not in our language, not with respect." Word spread quickly. Denise was not just translating, she was unlocking doors that had been closed for months. Back in the office, interns began stopping by her desk, shy but curious. "How did you learn so many languages?" One young recruit asked. Denise smiled gently. "One word at a time. Same way you will." She never spoke down to anyone, never showed off, just worked quietly. Efficiently, by the end of her second week, she had corrected multiple contracts, cut through costly errors, and built trust with partners who had nearly walked away. And she did it all without a title on her tongue, only calm discipline and patience. Not. Everyone admitted it out loud, but people began to notice. In the break room, one analyst whispered, "She just saved us $250,000 with that correction." Another replied, "She did it in silence too." No bragging. It was strange, almost unsettling. How? Quickly she became a symbol, not because she demanded it, but because she carried herself like someone who had nothing to prove, yet everything to give. Jonathan Kellerman watched from the side. Every report that landed on his desk now had her fingerprints. On it, he realized the experiment was no gamble at all. Denise was quietly transforming the culture of the company, not with speeches, not with slogans, but with results. By the end of the month, whispers had turned into conversations and conversations. Into something bigger. People across the building knew her name. Now Denise Atwater, the janitor, who suddenly sat in an office on the 12th floor. Some called it luck, some called it a publicity stunt, but others saw what was really happening. She was doing the work and doing it better than anyone expected. Monday morning, Jonathan Kellerman called a quiet meeting with HR and a few senior managers. No press, no cameras. Just a decision that would send ripples through the building. By that afternoon, the plaque outside the company's main training hall had been replaced. Gone was the old name that nobody remembered. In its place, a new sign brushed steel clean simple. The Atwater Room. No announcement was made, but word spread anyway. Interns walking. Past stopped to take photos. Few staff members paused and read the sign twice as if to make sure they were seeing it right. Denise heard about it only when one of the receptionists leaned in and whispered, "Congratulations." As she passed through the lobby, she blinked confused until she rode the elevator up and saw the plaque for herself. For a long moment, she just stood there staring at it. She had spent years walking past signs with other people's names, names tied to money or legacy or power. Now, hers was there not because of wealth, not because of family ties, but because she had proved her worth word by word, action by action. That same week, Kellerman sent out a company-wide email, short and direct. He explained her new role, outlined her responsibilities, and ended with a line that caught everyone's attention. Talent does not always come wrapped in a title. Sometimes it waits quietly until someone takes the time to see it. The message was forwarded, screenshotted, and talked about in break rooms. Some employees nodded in agreement. Others rolled their eyes, but no one could ignore it. Denise tried to keep her head down, but change has a way of drawing attention. When she walked through the building now, people noticed. Some offered polite nods. Others whispered behind her back. In the cafeteria, two analysts debated over sandwiches. One said, "She doesn't even have a degree." The other replied, "Maybe she doesn't need one. She just saved us a deal with Morocco." The tension was always there, a mix of admiration and resentment, but Denise never fed it. She simply kept showing up early, staying late, and letting results speak louder than gossip. One evening, after a long day of back-to-back meetings, she found a plain envelope sitting on her desk. Name, no return address, just her own, written neatly across the front. Inside was a short note. "I used to think I'd be invisible forever, but today I stood a little taller because of you. Thank you." Denise sat back in her chair staring at the paper. hurry, throat tightening. She folded the note, carefully placed it in her drawer beside her old janitor's badge, and closed it softly. It was a reminder that her story was no longer just hers. It belonged to others who needed to see what was possible. First signs of pushback came quietly. A cold look in the hallway, a meeting invite with no context, a folder dropped on her desk with more weight than necessary. Denise had lived long enough to recognize when people were sharpening their doubts. It did not surprise her. It only confirmed that she was being seen. Late on a Thursday, she received a message to report to the 17th floor conference room. When she stepped inside, the air was colder than the rest of the building. At the head of the table sat Eleanor Craig, a senior board member with 3 decades in the company and a reputation for ending careers with a sentence. Denise closed the door behind her and sat down quietly, hands folded on the table. Eleanor did not waste time. "I have reviewed your file," she said, her voice clipped and precise. "No college degree, no management certifications, no corporate training experience. 3 weeks ago, you were mopping floors." Denise met her stare without blinking. "That's correct." Eleanor leaned back. "Help me understand how someone with your background is now handling high-level international affairs." "Because I speak the languages," Denise replied calmly. "I understand the cultures, and I have already fixed contracts that were costing us money and restored trust with partners we were about to lose." Her tone was steady, not defensive, simply factual. Eleanor tapped her pen twice against the table. "So you think this company should be run on instinct and charm?" Denise gave a faint smile. "No, ma'am, I think it should be run on results." For the first time, Eleanor hesitated just slightly, her eyes narrowing before she closed the folder in front of her. "You're a gamble," she said. "Finally." "I'm used to that," Denise replied quietly. "My whole life has been one." The meeting ended with no promises, no congratulations, just silence and the sound of Denise's footsteps down the hall. She did not go back to her office right away. Instead, she walked outside, sat on a bench across the street, and stared up at the glass tower. For years, she had walked past it carrying a mop bucket, wondering if anyone even saw her. Now, everyone did, and not all of them were happy about it. She pulled out her phone, dialed her daughter. "Everything okay?" her daughter asked, sensing the weight. In her mother's voice, Denise nodded, though the gesture could not be seen. "Yeah, I just needed to hear you laugh." And for a few minutes they talked about small things, groceries, a new movie, the dog, nothing urgent, but everything grounding. When the call ended, Denise sat in silence for another long moment, then stood up, walked back across the street, and rode the elevator up to her floor. The next morning, she arrived early as always, and led a call with the German office, switching between English and German with ease. She was calm, sharp, unbothered. On the whiteboard outside her office, someone had scrawled 3 simple words in black marker. "We see you." Denise stopped and stared at it, her lips pressing together softly, for all the resentment, for all the whispers that one message was enough to remind her why she was there. Not to be liked, not to be accepted, but to be useful, to be seen. By the following weeks, something subtle began to shift inside the company. At first, it was just whispers. In the hallways, then it became footsteps toward her office door. People started coming to Denise not just for translations, but for advice, for clarity, for confidence. An intern stopped by one morning holding a draft presentation, his hands shaking slightly. "Could you look at this before I present?" he asked. Denise read it line by line, marked a few notes in the margin, and handed it back. "You've got this," she said. "Just slow down on slide 3. When he walked out, he stood taller than when he came. In others followed analysts, team leads, even middle managers who would never have spoken to her just weeks earlier, now stopped in for quiet conversations. Denise never acted like she had authority. She acted like she had time, and that was more powerful than any Title I of the intern's bow. A shy young man from Vietnam asked her during lunch, "How did you learn all those languages?" Denise smiled one word at a time. Same way, you will. It was simple, but it landed. He nodded, as if he had just been given permission to believe in himself. Kellerman noticed the traffic around her office, and he did not stop it. Instead, he leaned into it. One afternoon, he joined her for coffee in the break room. "Been hearing good things," he said. Denise sipped from her cup bin, trying to ignore the bad ones. He chuckled. "You're making waves. That a good thing?" she asked. "Around here it means you're doing something right." Then his tone shifted more serious. "I've been thinking about starting a program," he said. "A way to find hidden talent inside this building. People who might be overlooked the same way you were." Denise tilted her head. "You think there are more like me?" "There are," he said firmly. "They just haven't been seen yet. Want to help me build it?" Denise gave a small smile. "Already started in my head." By the end of the month, a pilot initiative was launched quietly at first. A training and mentorship program for employees in non-desk roles, custodians, receptionists, warehouse staff, delivery drivers, anyone who wanted. To learn new skills could sign up. It was called Voice Inside, a name Denise suggested, because she said talent often speaks softly until someone listens. The response shocked the leadership team. Dozens signed up within the first week. People who had spent years invisible suddenly raised their hands, eager to be noticed, and Denise became the face of it, not through posters or flashy announcements, but through presence. She walked into sessions, listened to stories, offered encouragement, and reminded everyone that brilliance does not come with a dress code. What began as one unexpected promotion started to ripple outward, touching people who had never believed they would get a chance. The culture of the company was changing, not from the top down, but from the inside out. It did not take long for the story to travel beyond the glass walls of Halberg International. At first, it was quiet mentions in industry newsletters. Then an invitation landed on Jonathan Kellerman's desk, Logistics Leadership. Summit in Cincinnati wanted someone to speak about untapped talent and global communication. Kellerman knew exactly who should go. When he walked into Denise's office with the invitation, she looked up from a stack of contracts with wary eyes. "A summit?" she asked. "I'm not a speaker. I mop floors, or at least I used to." He shook his head. "Not anymore. You tell your story, the way you always do, straight. No polish, no slogans. Just truth. That's what people need to hear." A few weeks later, Denise stood backstage at the conference hall watching executives in tailored suits gather in rows. Her beige blazer felt out of place against their silk ties, but she steadied herself. When her name was called, she walked to the podium. The room quieted curious. Many of them had read a short blurb in the program. Janitor turned cultural liaison, but they had no idea what was coming. Denise adjusted the microphone and spoke plainly. "I was never just a janitor," she said. "I was fluent. I was capable. I was ready. But nobody ever looked long enough to see it." She paused, letting the silence do its work. So the next time you walk past someone without a title or a corner office, ask yourself, what are you really missing? The room was frozen, silent at first, then slowly filled with applause, rising to a standing ovation. Denise did not beam or raise her arms. She simply nodded once and stepped back from the podium, calm as ever. On her way out, a young man stopped her near the exit. His voice shook. "My mom's a housekeeper," he said. "She speaks 5 languages." I used to be embarrassed to say that Denise touched his arm gently. "Don't ever be ashamed of where you come from." She told him, "The only shame is in staying blind to brilliance." Her words traveled faster than the conference. Organizers' expected clips of her speech surfaced online, shared through LinkedIn posts and industry forums. Within days, emails poured into Kellerman's inbox companies asking about the Voice Inside program. Journalists curious about the janitor who had changed corporate culture. One conversation at a time, back at Halberg. Denise did not let it change her routine. She still arrived early, still reviewed files, still sat with interns before their presentations. But now there was a different energy. In the halls, people nodded at her not just with curiosity but with respect. The Atwater room became a symbol whispered about by new hires who were told quietly that's where the company remembered what talent really means. The more Denise's influence grew, the more the old guard began to tighten their grip. For some people in power, her presence was inspiring. For others, it was threatening. And one of those was Eleanor Craig, the board member who had once called Denise a gamble. 2 weeks after the summit, Eleanor summoned Jonathan Kellerman to a private meeting. She paced the room, papers in hand. "This experiment has gone far enough, Jonathan," she said sharply. "She's a distraction. People are whispering. The company looks like it's chasing headlines." Kellerman stayed calm. "She's saving us money. She's repairing relationships. She's training the next generation. If that's a distraction, I'll take it." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "You're blinded by sentiment. She was scrubbing floors a month ago. Picketing crew. She's influencing deals worth millions." Jonathan leaned forward. "That's exactly why she belongs here. Because she proves that talent isn't confined to resumes and boardrooms." Word of Eleanor's opposition trickled down the halls, and by the end of the week, Denise heard about it herself. She was not surprised. Change always comes with resistance. But what mattered now was how she would respond. On Friday, she was asked to present updates on the Morocco partnership in front of senior leadership, including Eleanor. She walked into the boardroom carrying a slim folder and nothing else. No slides, no flashy charts, just her voice. She laid out the progress calmly, the contracts corrected, the delays cleared, the renewed trust in the partnership. Every fact was documented, every number precise. When she finished, the room was silent, not from doubt but from the weight of her words. Eleanor broke the silence with a single question. "You still have no degree." "Correct." Denise met her gaze. "That's correct." "Then, why should we trust you with international business?" Denise did not blink. "Because trust is not built on paper. It's built on results. And the results are right here." She slid the folder across the table pages marked with signatures and stamps, proof that the deal was moving forward stronger than before. Kellerman glanced at Eleanor as if to say the evidence speaks louder than argument. For the first time, Eleanor had no immediate reply. After the meeting, Denise returned to her office expecting whispers or cold stares, but instead she found something else. On her desk sat another envelope, this time signed by dozens of employees from across departments. The note inside read, simple, clear, "We stand with you." She sat back in her chair, her throat tight again, but she did not cry. She simply placed the note next to the first one in her drawer and closed it gently. That day, Denise realized something powerful. This was no longer about one woman moving from mop to meeting room. It was about every voice that had been overlooked, every skill dismissed, every person told they did not belong. And with each quiet victory, she was proving not just to herself, but to everyone watching that the old rules no longer applied. Months passed, but the echoes of her story never quieted inside the glass tower of Halberg International. What began as one janitor speaking 3 languages in a lobby had grown into something much larger, a shift in how people saw each other. The Voice Inside program flourished. Dozens of employees who once worked in silence now sat in training rooms sharing their stories, learning new skills, believing for the first time that they were more than their uniforms. Atwater Room became more than a sign on a wall. It became a symbol whispered about in orientation sessions, a reminder that talent hides in plain sight. Denise moved through the building differently now, not with the swagger of power, but with the steady calm of someone who knew exactly who she was. She still kept the old janitor's badge tucked in her drawer, along with the handwritten notes from colleagues. Some days when the pressure mounted, she would open that drawer, glance at the badge and the notes, and remind herself why she kept walking. Her daughter visited one Friday afternoon, stopping by the 12th floor office for the first time. She looked around at the desk, the plant, the nameplate on the door, and shook her head, smiling. "You always told me to never give up," she said. "I just didn't know how much you meant it." Denise laughed softly. "Neither did I." Outside the building, her story had taken on a life of its own. Articles appeared in business journals about overlooked talent. Her summit speech was replayed in leadership workshops across the country. Other companies reached out asking how to start programs like Voice Inside. Denise never sought the spotlight, but she never ran from it either. Whenever someone asked, she told the same truth. "I was never just a janitor. I was always ready. You just have to look long enough to see people." One morning, as she walked through the lobby where it all began, she noticed something small but powerful. A new group of interns had arrived. Fresh-faced, nervous, clutching folders. One of them glanced at her, then whispered to another, "That's her." The other intern straightened his posture like he had just been given permission to dream bigger than before. Denise smiled, but kept walking because she understood now the work was never about her alone. It was about opening doors for those who would come after her. By the end of the year, Halberg International had not just grown its global business, it had grown a new culture. One where people were seen not for their uniforms but for their potential. And at the heart of that change was a woman who had spent 13 years cleaning floors, quietly sharpening her mind word by word, until the right moment arrived. Denise Atwater never asked for recognition, but she earned something greater. She earned proof that brilliance can rise from anywhere, even from a mop bucket, even from the shadows of a lobby at dawn. And the lesson she left behind was simple. Never assume you know someone's worth based on where you find them, because sometimes the person pushing the cart at night is the one who will guide the company through the light of day. If this story moved you, if it made you rethink how we see people in our everyday lives, then don't. Let it stop here. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what part of Denise's journey spoke to you most. And if you believe more people need to hear stories like this about resilience, power, and hidden brilliance, then hit that like button. And subscribe, because every week we bring you real stories that challenge prejudice and remind us all that greatness can come from the most unexpected places. Don't miss the next on.